Man, I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm on an island because I'm so enamored with just basic life that I think I seem to look around sometimes and see seems like people take it for granted, and sometimes um, just like complain, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm not saying I don't complain, but like just the past few weeks with travel for work and going to a couple little local car meets and stuff, and meeting people and talking to people, and I made a couple calls this past week. I think you guys, I've always shared my work stuff with you, but I've been working on a big project that's the biggest one I've ever worked on in my career, and I landed it, which is awesome. Thank you. I know. Trust me, I'm praising God right now because that's my the way my pay structure is. I get like a waitress. I get like a real low uh, salary, but commission. I got to have commission. So those projects push me over to get my commission. So this is a big one, and it will do very well for me for the year. Eventually, it takes a while to get. Um, but as I was driving, I started to get emotional, as I do. I started thinking about all the people that influenced me in the past, and I called three guys that I remembered. Uh, and I want to kind of get to this too. I was thinking about it as we were at the fireworks, getting to know Mike and Penny and some of their history, where they used to live and what he used to do for a living. And they kind of did the fireworks thing as a side hustle, kind of like we all do the side stuff that we're interested in. Um, like I'll do the car stuff, and I'll buy and sell stuff like that. And just getting to know people and hearing people's stories, how important that is. And then Margaret last week talking about testimony and how important that is, and hearing people's stories and how powerful that can be. I want to give a little bit of my testimony because some of you have heard it already, and some of you don't know anything about me and my history. So for those that have heard it, sorry, you got to sit through a little bit of it. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. Um, but part of that, as I was saying, not having a dad around when I was younger, I really appreciated the few men that stepped up to encourage me the times that I needed it most and didn't know that I needed it. One of those times was when I hadn't long been saved, and I was trying to figure out my life and realized that may have some value. That sounds bad, but like I never thought that high school dropout, in trouble a lot when I was younger, a lot of bad stuff I'll get into in a minute. But at this point in my life, I thought, after I got saved, I started working unto the Lord, like the Bible told me. I knew very little about the Bible. I was just trying to figure all this stuff out. Um, I thought reaping and sowing was talking about, because that's what I learned from my grandmother when I lived with her, was reaping and sowing. I didn't even know about farming, and I was trying to read the Bible and figure all this stuff out. And in the middle of all that, a few people stepped in. One of them was an industrial sales manager that I knew, and he came to me, and had kind of moved up pretty quick in the company. I was over a whole department, and I had, not knowing what I'm doing, just jumped in there and lowered inventory and raised profit. And everybody was like, "Yay, Justin's the best. He's doing all this great stuff in here." And I felt really good, but they really weren't paying me much at all, and I didn't know any different. And so he came to me and he was like, "Hey, you're really good at doing what you're doing." He said, "You should go into outside sales." And I was like, "No, that sounds terrible. Like, hey, what can I do you for? Like, how can I get you in this, spray pump or whatever, And I was like, that's just not me. It's not same way I felt when people kept telling me I was going to be a pastor and do all this stuff. I was like, that's just not me. I think you with good intentions, you're a little off. That's not me. And so I always thought, yeah, not me. And so this same thing, this guy came, he said, and he was a Christian too. And he said, man, I see a lot of potential in you. Um, and I told him, I was like, I'm just not a sales guy like that. And he was like, yeah, but you like to help people. And he said, and I see how you relate to people and talk to people in here. And he said, I think you do really well outside. And he said, plus, you're never going to make any real money in here. The real money is out there in outside sales. And I thought, I mean, that sounds interesting. I'd like to make some more money. You get a company car and all this other extra stuff. And I was like, okay, super scared and never done it before. And so I was like, well, yeah, let's go for it. So trained a guy to take my position, went outside sales, and I did well for 2 or 3 years. Company made some changes. Like I switched, another thing that God worked out for me in previous years had set me up in training with a guy that I met. And anyway, all that to say, I ended up getting the position that I'm now. That was the best decision I ever made. but was a hard thing because I'd worked at this company since I dropped out of high school, and for 18 years I'd been with this company, and it was quite a leap to jump and go somewhere else, but it was the best decision I think I could have ever made at that point. But to pick up, I was born at a very young age. No, I was. I always I always tell this story. I always tell this story, and it's obviously secondhand because I wasn't born yet. But my mom tells the story that she had a rough life, and my dad had a rough life. He had been through lots of foster care and orphanages, and lots of abuse was going on all the way around in those situations. It was the 70s, so you know what was going on back then, and it was wild. And my when my mom found out I was pregnant, I was. This is not that kind of message. When my mom found out she was pregnant, because men can't get pregnant. No, do I? I'll have to edit that part out. Well, mom found out that she was pregnant. My dad basically told her to get rid of me, that they didn't want a baby, and gave her cash to go to the doctor and do what was needed to be done. And she tells me that she had the money in one hand and the phone in the other to call the doctor. And she said she wasn't a Christian then, but she said she swears she heard God's voice say to leave him alone, he's mine. And looking back, that's very moving for me. But even on into, she said I was diapers. She would tell me that she didn't have a lot of money, and my dad was on and off of cocaine, and he was an alcoholic and abusive. And if you've ever been in that environment, it's tough. It's tough to see, and it's normal to you because you don't know anything different. And so you see all this stuff going on around you, and you think, man, this is what life is. This is what it's supposed to be. I was actually talking to Nick Rhodes about it the other day. He came over and we were talking, and I was telling him about some of the things that had kind of shifted and changed my perspective. And I said, all the physical abuse that I had to deal with when I was younger wasn't as long lasting as the mental and emotional trauma that went along with it, because those are the things that shaped how I functioned. The physical stuff I could get past. I mean, there was a lot of like anger and frustration, but the mental and emotional trauma made it very difficult for me to like navigate life when I was younger. And even as I got older, even up, until recently, my kids asked if they could stay out till a certain time last night, and immediately my mind goes to, man, if anything ever happened. But I also have to remind myself that the worst thing that's ever happened to them is, my friend told me this the other day when we were talking. He said, Justin, you have to realize that the worst thing that's ever happened to them is radically different than the worst thing that's ever happened to you. They don't have a frame of reference for that. And I said, I get that, but statistically, it's, especially when they were younger, why can't we stay the night with anybody? Like, it's the friends or the family that they say that, and that was the stuff that I experienced when I was younger. And so, man, I was always stressed out and like worried about it all the time, and hoped that I didn't traumatize them too bad. But, warned them of the dangers and the evil that happens. But to grow up in that environment and then try to figure out life, I had to relearn a lot of things. And I had to, especially, man, this church specifically, and to be able to, I keep getting a dead spot, to be able to love people and be open about giving people the benefit of the doubt. That was always really hard for me, because I assumed everyone was bad. Growing up, they're all bad. And so that takes a toll on you over the years. And so, like I said, in middle school and high school, I had a lot of anger and rage, and we didn't have a lot of money. I always say that I thought we were poor, but I've actually been to poor places. We weren't really poor. Our power got turned off, or we didn't have the cool shoes. But I've been to the Bordeaux and in Honduras, and there's levels. That's all relative. But for me, I felt less than and didn't fit in, that kind of thing. And so I always tell the story of I bet we bounced around a lot, and my mom would always she worries that she was like, there's always powdered sugar, and I never buy donuts. I don't know why there's powdered sugar on the coffee table all the time. It wasn't powdered sugar. And so, and a lot of times I make part of the coping is making light of some of this stuff too. But it is kind of funny to look back on to see some of the terrible things that we saw. But in the middle of it, she was clueless about some of it. But seeing your dad get drunk and beat up your mom and because of nothing at all, like nothing significant. It was just a misunderstanding or a disagreement. It really makes you think about how you speak to people and what that looks like. And so I was quiet for a very long time because you never knew what would set somebody off. And so as I grew up and I bounced around, we went from Alice, Texas. I had 3 friends named Ramiro, Eric, and Chucky. They were all Mexican, and they were awesome. And we would go on cardboard and break dance for quarters. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And then I think my dad was always doing something stupid, cheated on my mom or something. So we ended up back. We'd always end up back. Kind of our safe place was in Lake Charles in a tiny house before tiny houses were cool. It was just because we were poor. And it had 2 window units, one in my grandparents' room and one in the living room. And so our room was pretty warm most of the time in South Louisiana. But there was just such a peace there because there wasn't, I'm not saying there wasn't any turmoil because it was pretty wild there too, but there wasn't violence and there wasn't the drugs and all the things that went along with it. So it was kind of a very safe place for me. So I always kind of, we'd go and then we'd end up back there and we'd go and end up back there. And my mom eventually got remarried and she wanted to move to Decatur, Alabama. And she took me up there and I didn't want to go up there. So I moved back down with my grandparents. Lived there for a while, and my grandmother was the main one that was like our kind of the glue that held our family together, our little bit of family that we had there together. And unfortunately, one night I was between Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Blossom, if you remember that time. It was right in between those two, and she wasn't feeling well. My grandmother wasn't feeling well and went to lay down in bed, and I went to check on her in that break between Fresh Prince and Blossom, and she had passed away. And so I had to call 911. My grandfather kind of blamed me for it. And so that was a whole other story. And so just kind of circles of all the things that went on. And then as we moved to Alabama, I was kind of forced to move over here when my stepdad got a job, I think at Exxon or somewhere down here. And they moved to Dauphin Island. And so I was like, cool, an island. I'm going to move to Dauphin Island. That'll be cool. So moved to Dauphin Island, kind of continued that cycle of trying to fit in and trying to be cool or whatever it is. But at that time, my stepdad began to make a little bit of money. So we were like, as far as I was concerned, we were like rich, had a house on the island and it was just a really cool place to be. And so I began to kind of fit in with the group down there. And so we would do the things that you do as a teenager. We'd party and do all the dumb things to try to fill that void that was in me. And I remember distinctly one night I was at a party. My mom was upset with me because I'd been doing a lot of stupid stuff. And she called me, or no, she didn't call me. I was like 1 or 2 a.m. and I woke up and I was at some place with I don't know where I was at somebody's party. And I woke up and I remember thinking distinctly, like, is this it? Like, I felt like I felt like people liked me or whatever. I was funny. People wanted to hang out with me. I felt cool or whatever. And I was doing all the things that I thought would satisfy, that would make my life good. And I wasn't at all satisfied. And I remember thinking, is this it? Like, is this all that life has? And I remember driving home that night or early that morning and really just contemplating life. Well, not long after that, I got in some trouble and got arrested. And that's another eye-opening thing. If you ever get arrested on Dauphin Island too, I thought, well, I'm just going to go to this little Dauphin Island jail. I'll be out tomorrow, whatever. No, they were like driving me to Metro, and I was like, "Are we going to jail? Like this? I'm really going to jail?" And he was like, "Yeah, you're going." So ended up going to Metro, and that kind of forced my hand in a few areas because I had to pay restitution, and I already had a job, and I was trying to do all this stuff. So that's where the judge told me that basically he said I had to get my GED. It was kind of court ordered, and so it was an interesting time in life because I was doing hundreds of hours of community service. I was working to pay restitution, and I was going to night classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that I could get my GED. And so I did all that. The cool thing about that is it pulled me away from that lifestyle that I had been living enough to where I started really thinking about that morning and what this whole life was all about. And if that's all it was, then, what's the point of any of it? At the same time, I got a job at Mobile Paint, the one I stayed at for 18 years. And I met this guy named Jarrett. And he was the type of Christian that sang really loud in a warehouse and was kind of annoying. But he would sing worship songs, and he would talk about Jesus all the time, and he was always seemed to be pretty chipper and happy, and it was weird. And I wasn't sure how to take him, but all the other people in my life had an angle, or had a hook, as we would call it. And so I wanted to see what his angle was. I was just curious enough to poke at Jarrett and ask him some hard questions. And Jarrett was very patient with me. Well, not kind of. I was a jerk. Thankfully, Jarrett was kind of a jerk too. Like, he was just sarcastic enough to where we kind of hit right at the same time. And but he was patient enough to not just condemn me all the time, which is what I usually got from church folks. Even growing up when we would go to church here and there, I always felt the same way I did in school or anywhere else. I felt less than. I felt I didn't fit in. It just wasn't the place for me. Well, Jarrett took the time to get to know me and hear kind of who I was, and also give me the gospel in a way that I could understand it, if that makes sense. And I think his patience over a year and a half, that, and then this one instance I've told several of you before, where I'm dealing with all this turmoil and trying to figure out what God was chasing me the whole time. I see, looking back now, what was going on. Lord was running me down. I was trying to avoid him, and he was running me down. And Jarrett, I remember Jarrett walking into the break room one day, and one of his family, basically like a mother figure to him, had passed away, and I hadn't seen him all day. He'd been out in his car. We'd have 2 15-minute breaks. He was out in his car for the first 15-minute break, so normally I would see him on that break in the break room. And I saw him passing, coming through the break room, and you could see his face had been crying all day, and you could see he was just upset, And I said, "Man, are you okay?" And I kind of knew what was going on. Someone had told me, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he looked at me as just, I'll never forget. And he said, "Yeah, God is so good." Man, that just shook me. And I thought, how could this guy say that? Like, he just lost someone that he cared very deeply for, and he just told me that God is good. Like, I didn't sleep. That really got me. And I remember trying to sleep that night and tossing and turning and trying to figure out, is this real? Is this just, is this another hustle? What's he want? Does he want money, church attendance? What's his angle? And I was like, man, there's no angle. This dude's genuine. And it really struck me. And look, like I said, looking back, you can see these things. And what that was the Holy Spirit drawing me to him, to see that his character was real, that he was good. Beyond our circumstances, beyond all the terrible things that had happened to me, he was still good. And that's such a strange thing to get. And so he invited me not long after that to Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames thing. I don't know if you remember those. Some of them are weird, but it was it had some pretty dramatic scenes, and some of them spoke to me from my childhood, some violence and some crazy stuff. But it was just God's timing, really, more than anything. It was that Baptist church that's on Airport, closer to Schillinger, that big one. And Jared didn't even show up. He's gave me these tickets, and so I was there by myself. And I just remember, I couldn't wait for them to do the altar call thing, because I was like, I'm ready. This is it. I'm ready to give up. And I always think about that day. The very last thing I wanted to give up was the first thing that God asked for, and it was control in my life. And I always thought that I was in control, because I couldn't really trust the people that were around me that I didn't know that they always had my best interest, because of some of the things that I'd experienced when I was younger. And so my mindset was that I'm ultimately going to have to take care of myself. And I think that's pretty common. I don't think that's just specific to me, but I think it's something that we really struggle with because we really have this false sense of security. Like, I always think about this because I work on cars a lot, and I think, man, we lock our doors at night, but if you knew one bolt coming off of your car is just game over. Like, we'd run 80 down the interstate. Do you know what that does? If something goes wrong? Like, we really think we're in, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just trying to say we really think we're in control. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. And so, but man, what an incredibly amazing, beautiful, liberating thing to give all that to God in a moment. And I mean, it was just like that. And I was just like, if you're saved, I hope you're saved. You're just on cloud nine. You're just like, this is so good. This is better than any other substance that I'd tried. Like, this is real. And I just remember being on cloud nine for like, I don't know, probably 2 or 3, 4 weeks. Go every church service I could find. Like, I just got to go to church, and then I got to read the Bible, and I don't know what the Bible is. I'm trying to figure this stuff out, and going to church and listening to all these pastors, and then I started feeling the same way about 2 or 3, 4 weeks into it. I started thinking, maybe I don't fit in here either. And if you know my story too, it was all the religious stuff started piling up, and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. Like, I know what happened to me is real. I know that something changed in me. I know I'm a different person, but something's not right here, and it's got to be me. It's not the preacher. He has to know what he's talking about up there. And so it's got to be me. And at the time, I went to a charismatic church, and it doesn't matter where you went. I'm not saying one way or another, but for me, it was a very charismatic church, which was great. Had some great things happen, but they were really pushed a lot of falling out and speaking in tongues and all the gifts, which are all great. I'm not dissing any of those, but for me, it wasn't happening. And I thought, well, it's me. It must be me. I didn't confess enough, or I didn't do enough, or I don't have the right anointing. And so every Sunday I'm just crying, and and they're laying hands, and I'm like, I'm not falling. What's wrong with me? Like, what is going on? Like, why can't I do the things? Like, I love God. Something happened. I want to do the things. And I felt less than again, and I was like, well, maybe I don't know what's going on. And so I struggled with that for a long time. And then I met Tracy, and Tracy went to a Methodist church. So mine was a Church of God, and she went to a Methodist church. I don't know if you've been to those two, but they're a little different. They're a lot different. And so she would come to my church, and she would be like this. And have you ever heard concert prayer? Oh, man, when everybody prays at once out loud, she was like, what is going on? And there's ladies running around screaming. And I was like, yeah, this is fun. And I go to Tracy's church, and I'm like, oh. And stand up, sit down, repeat, stand up, sit down, repeat. Well, I don't know what to say. What are we supposed to say? And so that was an interesting time. So we checked out a bunch of other churches in Mobile. And then we're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where we need to go, because I'm a little more charismatic and you're a little more not. But we're trying to figure all this whole thing out. And so we landed at Crosspoint, which is Rick Cagle. If you don't know, he was one of the ones under Fred Wolf, like Mark was. It's cool how that kind of legacy trickles down like that. But we ended up there, and I think just because I had like spiky hair, he asked me to be the youth pastor or something. I was like, and then even back then I was like, nah, I don't think that's for me. I don't know enough. And he's like, man, it's like my kids. It's like 3 people in the youth group. You'll be fine. And they probably taught me more than I taught them, because I didn't know very much then. And so, but I was dabbling in ministry, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I really like this. It's very interesting. I really started digging it. And anytime you get to teaching somebody or trying to help people, you'll start learning pretty quick. And so that forced me to really dig into Scripture and understand what this stuff was, which was probably one of the most important things for me at the time, because I was really just taking secondhand what the pastors were telling me. And I'll give you this caveat, I think with very good intentions, they were trying to help. I don't think that they were intentionally, I hope they weren't intentionally trying to just hustle people. I think that with good intentions they were trying to help, but there was just so much out of context religious jargon, and not any specific denomination. They were all very similar in this performance-based religion that just weighs down that awesome feeling that I had those first 4 weeks, which is freedom from sin and reconciliation with the Father. And I think that's why our church is so important. Not that we're special, but most of us have felt that and have seen that and have come out of that, and it's so important to share that with other people, because the churches that I know of that haven't closed down are declining. And I think they're declining because of people see real and not real. Like when I was lost, I could tell the difference between someone trying to hustle me and someone that was genuine. Jarrett was genuine, not that some of the other people weren't, but some of them weren't. Some of them were trying to hustle me when I was younger. And so all that to say, I was youth pastor there at Cross Point. It was great. We began to grow and learned a lot from Rick. He was very knowledgeable on Bible. So I learned a lot about Greek and Hebrew. A lot of really good things happened there. But there was a season that was ending there, and it was very difficult for me because I didn't want to be a church hopper and all this kind of stuff. And Tracy heard from the Lord like probably a year and a half before I did. And she was like, I think it's time for us to go. And I was like, I'm the youth pastor. We can't go anywhere. And she was like, well, I feel like that's what the Lord's telling us. And so sometimes it takes a while for me to catch up. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. I think it is time. And so met with Rick and we talked and worked everything out. And then right about the time I didn't know where we were going to go, we started visiting churches again. And I saw Bill Starling sitting Indian style in the middle of 90 taking pictures. He was a photographer for the Press Register at the time. And I was like, there's Bill Starling. And so I turned around. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, taking pictures. You want to get lunch? And I was like, sure. And so we went and got lunch, and he told me about Deeper Life at the time on 90. And he was like, I was very hungry for outreach. I didn't know what to call it. I was very hungry for outreach. And at the time, Deeper Life was doing servant evangelism, which is a big thing. I think Steve Sojourn had started. And so it was just perfect timing. And so we went and visited, and Mark wasn't even preaching the first few weeks. It was like the fathers of the faith came through. So it was like Fred Wolf and Peter Paris and a bunch of other people. And so listen to all them, but it was the people. Like, people were so genuine and so like real. And there was such a freedom in worship and such a freedom and Mark would ask at the end if anybody has any questions, and I was like, what? This is crazy. And so just everything about it, and he had like a Narnia poster up, and I was like, what? Narnia? Is that okay? Can we watch that? Like, I was still pretty legalistic back then. Like, I was trying to figure all this stuff out. And so, like, that was a great season. I'm not going to get to everything that I want to get to, but that was a great season. And then, we came over here, and even then, when we left Cross Point and came to Deeper Life, I told Tracy, I was like, did we have Trinity at that time? Yeah, we had Trinity and when we were here. Oh, okay. Yeah, but we had already, yeah, because I think Mark came to the hospital with Jordan, right? So anyway, so we had kids, and I was like, I'm not going to sacrifice my family for the church. So I'm not going to be a youth pastor. I'm not going to do anything. We're just going to come and sit on the back row and enjoy church. And so, you think you know everything all the time, or I do sometimes. And so we sat back there and enjoyed it. It was great. And I was like just itching the whole time to do something. But I was like, no, I'm not going to do anything. Well, Neil at the time was youth pastor, and he asked me to come speak to the youth. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not. I was like super serious. I was like, yeah, but I'm not. Like, I'll go talk to him, like give my testimony, but that's it. Like, I'm not getting involved. And so he invited me up there, and as soon as I got up there, I was like, my heart just melted, and I was like, man, I miss this. I miss teaching, and I miss having deep, good conversations. And once again, it was just a really good season and perfect transition for me to go up there. And so I kept coming back, and then didn't take long. He was like, well, you want to be youth pastor? And I was like, I guess. Yes, of course I do. It's awesome. So I became youth pastor and was youth pastor for years. And then even when we walked with Mark through some of his hardest days, like there towards the end, I remember Tracy and I praying like, are you I'm asking her, are you hearing anything? Because everything seems pretty crazy right now. Like, should we leave? Like, should we find another church? And I'm listening to other churches around Mobile, and I'm like, I don't know that we could go anywhere else. Like, I don't know that that's going to work. And so we stuck right by Mark's side through to the very end and trying to figure out what to do. And he was just done and burned out. And And then I was completely shocked when he asked me to be pastor. I was like, and the same thing. It was like all over again. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, are you serious? Youth pastor is one thing, but like pastor, like, are you serious? And he was like, and so that's kind of how we ended up here. And it's just like all of that to say, like, that journey and that story, I hope I hope you know me a little better if you didn't already. I know there's some people that didn't know some of that. Some of you guys know. But I think the reason I wanted to tell you guys that, I meant to do it a little quicker, but that's how it is. It's my whole life. I'm getting old. It takes a little longer now. But like, did any of that resonate with you? Like, did you feel any of that? I think that there's a reason why we do that, and it's kind of what I want to talk about that I don't have a lot of time to talk about. There's the Bible is not just a cosmic rule book that's been plopped down for you to try to figure out. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of how it's presented in a lot of ways. I heard a pastor say this, and he gave these statistics, so I'll give you his name if you want to check them. But he said there's 502 chapters, or basically 43% of the Bible is narrative, which is like a story. That's the majority of it. 387 chapters, or 33%, is poetry, which, if you're familiar with poetry, is very dense, passionate, like creative. 33%, very creative. You know, poetry is just very beautiful, and it's just really cool. And 300 chapters, or 24%, is discourse, which is basically what we would learn and understand and have discussions about, which is interesting because most people don't approach the Bible from that. Most people approach the Bible from, I need to learn from, discuss, debate, understand, and clarify everything from it. Not to say you don't do that, because obviously there is some of that, but the majority of it is more of a narrative, front to back, and we've talked about that before. When you read something like a story, we leave out so much, and it's funny because the pastor that was talking about it held up a Bible, and I should do this, but I'm just going to tell you what he did. And he was like, we understand from Genesis, and then we have, we call it this, and then we have redemption and this, and he holds up the Bible, and it's like 3/4 of it that we skip. And he was like, what about all this? And he says that because, just like I'm talking about here, there's a big picture story going on in the Bible, and it's not just about you. We have to see that. The cool thing is he brings us into that big story. It is an epic narrative. Do you like good movies? Like, if I asked you right now your favorite movie, what's your favorite movie? Just Star Wars. Lord of the Rings. Both very good examples. Those are Chariots of Fire. The Star Wars and Lord of the Rings specifically are very long because there's several of them with lots of character development, lots of storyline, lots of understanding. I guess Chariots of Fire is too. But the Bible's the same way. Like, you couldn't just take a piece of that and you wouldn't fully understand the rest of it because you have all these other things going on. The Bible is cool in that it doesn't just teach us something, it invites us into something. And so God has this thing going on, which is our lives, which is life, and we get pulled into it. It's not just saying, okay, I understand theologically and intellectually about why these things are this way. Those are good things to understand, but even more importantly, you get to be a part of it. Right? He says, look, you're gonna find troubles on earth, but be of good cheer because I've taken care of that. I've overtaken the world. Look, even when Adam and Eve did what Adam and Eve did, even his judgment had mercy. He didn't curse them. He cursed the ground and the snake. And he said, there's going to be a man that's going to come and take care of this. Like, he was so focused on redemption even from the beginning, but so many times we look at it as though God's just so angry with us, but Jesus steps in and fixes it. God always wanted us to be redeemed. It was always his plan. The beauty of that, and the beauty of understanding that we do simplify the Bible in our own way, but we don't need to oversimplify it, if that makes sense. The reason why I think we like movies, like really good movies, is because we can relate to it. There's usually, a tragedy or hurt or conflict that needs to be resolved. Look, about 3/4 of the Bible is conflict that needs to be resolved. Like, there's a reason why we're drawn to it. We have this left brain, right brain, and it's not just so that we, like it's some fairy tale, it's real. And there's a reason why we're drawn to it is because that's who we're created to be. He made us that way. And so when I said something at the beginning about how, like, every time I wake up, I think, and as I get older, it's even more apparent, like, time is the only non-renewable resource that I have on earth, right? It's the only thing that I can't get more of. I can make more money, or I can, I could do these other things, but time on earth is limited. I mean, that we can all agree on that. One out of every one of us is going to physically die one day, statistically. And so once you get to that place, to me, you can do one of two things. You can be afraid of that, and Tracy and I were talking about this the other day. My family is traditionally very pessimistic, and so my grandfather would say every year, "I just hope I make it to another Christmas." He did that for 20 years. And I'm like, eventually you're going to be right, and you're not going to make it for another Christmas. But why would you want to live your life thinking about that the whole time? On the flip side of that, I'm aware of it, but I'm so appreciative of the time that I have. And so I think about the value today. When we pray every Sunday, I'm like, Lord, thank you for another opportunity just to speak to people about you. I mean, it really is that simple. Like, man, how cool is it that we're still here? I don't want to oversimplify it, but how cool is it that we're still here, that we're still breathing, we still get to do this stuff, like from the smallest to the biggest. Like, this is what God has given us as a gift, and I think that we don't need to overlook that. The Bible's a story to help us get to know our Heavenly Father. To not only learn about his character, but to actually experience it by being brought into this epic story. Going from, and I always say this when I give my testimony, it's not that I'm special or something, because there was another time that that my mom tells me the story that she had gone to a mechanic because her car had broken down, and I was not there. I was in diapers or somewhere at home, and this old man came up to her and said, "You have a son," like prophesied over her. And she was like, "Yeah, I do." And he very boldly said, "Well, he's gonna reach many people for the Lord one day." And she was like, "He's in diapers, but we'll see how that goes." But those kind of things, and when I always talk about like my testimony, I don't think I genuinely like that's everyone. That's not just for me. And I always thought about that because I was always scared to repeat it because I thought like I'm trying to lift myself up as something special. But it's not. The same message is for you. You are his. That same phone call, hey, leave him alone, he's mine. Same for you. You're going to reach many people for the Lord. You too. It's not just for me. Those messages that she got that I speak are for everyone that's in here and everyone out there that wants to accept it. The beauty of it is the story's going on with or without us. We just got to jump in on it. And it is, I always love the speaking of Narnia, the whole Narnia thing. Is he safe? No one said anything about safe, but he's good. The Christian life should be an epic story. It should be adventurous. It may be sketchy at times. But let the Lord make it sketchy. Don't don't be weird for no reason. I always tell everybody that because I talk to a lot of people who don't go to church, and the consensus is pretty solid that if you're out in the world and you start speaking Christianese, people just shut down. Like, talk to people like you talk to people, like normal. Like, you can say the same things without sounding like, a preacher from the 50s. You can say the same things by not putting people off, because what you do, if you walk up to somebody, hey, and I'm not trying to criticize, so you can talk to me later and we can discuss it, but If you walk up to somebody and say, hey, brother so-and-so, I'm blessed and highly favored, what you do to someone who doesn't speak like that is you immediately almost ostracize them because you're speaking differently than the way that they speak. It's not that you're not saying good things, but you're speaking in a way that they don't understand. I've told, in youth it was the same way. I could tell them, the secrets of the galaxy, whatever. But if you don't say it in a way they understand, it doesn't matter. And if someone came to me when I was younger and spoke that way, I'd be like, what? Just speak normal. You can say the same things. If you're around another Christian and that's how they speak, that's fine. You can speak like that, I guess. But it's just as important for how we approach people, because everyone has either a preconceived notion or some misunderstanding about church and church people that you may spark immediately if you come across that way. I'm not saying be scared to talk about Jesus. Talk about him all the time. I do. But the cool thing is he comes up in almost every conversation because it's on everyone's mind somewhere. Not because you used a bunch of Christianese that nobody understands. All right, I'm going off on a tangent there. Just only be weird when God makes you weird. Don't be weird for no reason. I'll say it that way. Because God will put you out. He'll put you out there to say some things. Most of the time when he does that to me, I'll preface it by saying, this is going to sound crazy or this is going to sound weird. But, and people are more receptive to that usually than you just running up and putting them in a headlock and praying for them. All right. Let me pray for you guys and we'll get out of here. Father, we thank you, Lord. I thank you that you have given us the beauty of this life. Lord, help us to not take it for granted and help us to shape the way that we think based on you and your kingdom and not simply what we see going on around us, because everything that we see is temporary and you are eternal and your kingdom is eternal. So help us to see things in that way. So as we leave this place, Lord, that you would highlight people that need to hear from us, need to hear from you through us, Lord. And Lord, also place people in our lives, Lord, that would build us up as we need it as well. In Jesus' name, amen.